It's time now for Home Repairs and Solutions with Mark and Mary. Mark's not here today, but was last week. Brought to you by Spring Mountain Air Heating and Air Conditioner, your local Amana dealer. And here is your host this morning, Mary Pearson. Mary, welcome back. And when I say that, we've been off the air for about an hour or so due to technical difficulties, and they are now repaired, taken care of. So we are back on the air.
We hope. That happens sometimes. Are we here?
Yes, they're putting us on, they said. So okay. We'll just keep going. I think we'll be, if we're not on right now, we will be very soon.
Okay. Well, we're just going to start the show then and hope you guys can hear us out there. As we get started here, let me give out our number because I think we might have some callers today. We have a great guest on the show today. And so our number here is 862-9977 or 1-800-375-0056. We're not going to get our full hour today, so we're just going to kind of get started here and see how far we can get. But my guest today is Mike Monroe with On-Site Inspections. Mike does septics and wells, and I thought this would be a great time to have him on the air because we have had some issues with those here lately because of the we're not getting any rain, and it's very dry, and so I think there's some people having some issues with septics and wells and different things. So we thought we'd bring an expert on to answer questions if you have any. So welcome to the show, Mike. It's great to have you on today.
Oh, thank you, Mary.
It's going to be a very quick hour, more like probably 35 minutes, but we're going to give it a go here. And some of the things we were talking about before the show, which I thought was really interesting, and I have tons of questions, so we're definitely going to run out of time. But we were talking about the different toilet papers that's available, and if you're on a septic system, how to tell if you're using the right toilet paper. And how did you say to test your toilet paper to find out if you're using what you should be or not?
All right. The best way to figure out if a toilet paper is going to work with a septic system, and it even is true about city sewer, because even though Dan had said that he's not on a septic system, he is on a septic system. It's just a giant one.
That is correct.
Oh, yeah.
That is correct.
Right?
You're on one, Dan. It's just not like some of us.
Right. Some of us have our own.
It's not just a tank.
Right.
Correct.
Right. Some of us have on-site. Some of us have city sewer. So to test your toilet paper, you just take one sheet of toilet paper, is typical, and preferably unused, and you
preferably.
And you put it in a glass of water, and once it's in the glass of water, you stir it around, and that piece of toilet paper should disintegrate and not, wrap around your fork or your spoon, and then you shouldn't be able to take it out, wring it out, and,
Use it like a paper towel?
Exactly, yeah.
So it should disintegrate very quickly then as you stir it?
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
And so if your toilet paper is not doing that, folks, get rid of it and find one that does that, especially if you have an on-site septic.
I have a lot of people that cry when they can't use the soft stuff. But if it's good for bears, it's not good for septics.
There you go. Well, that's true. We're kind of delicate creatures, and we kind of like to have things soft and comfortable. But I also don't like septic problems. We've had those in the past, and those are very unpleasant. We're on septic now, which seems to be doing just fine. But so when it's dry like this, are there any issues, or is there anything that we should be doing to make everything work properly or keep it going, or does dry weather affect septic tanks?
Yes. What mostly affects the septic system is the amount of oxygen that's in the soil. So when it's dry, we have less water, so your septic should work actually better in dry season because you don't normally see surfacing sewage or problems in a dry time of year because all the water that goes out there is getting absorbed into the soil rather quickly, and the plants are eating it, and consequently it doesn't come to the surface because there's usually two types of sewage problems: backing up and surfacing. That's the two. Mm-hmm. And the concept...
backing up is the worst, in my opinion.
Right. Well,
I'd rather have it floating outside than inside.
The definition of a problem septic system is in your perception.
That's true.
From a homeowner's point of view, if you go use the bathroom and you pull the handle and everything goes away, your septic system is perfect. If you go there, pull the handle, and it doesn't, just blurps and doesn't go away, then there's a major problem.
Sure.
But septics have an in-between, and there's things to look for, signs and things that are happening. Like this time of year, It's very, very obvious where there's two parts to a septic usually. The septic tank and the drain field are also called lateral lines. And right now, the green stripes in your backyard are definitely
The lateral lines.
The lateral
Yeah.
lines.
Oh, yeah.
And they're very obvious. If you have any issues now, then you've got a pretty serious problem because, it's very dry. And
So it should be working pretty effectively then during the dry season.
Yes.
Unless there is a problem somewhere.
Correct.
So how would you, what would you look for to know if maybe you're having an intermediate problem? Is there something that you could look for in the yard, or how do you know that you might be having an issue?
Well, the number one thing that I would probably think would be make sure your septic tank has a riser on it. And when I talk about a riser, that's a large pipe that extends to the surface.
Yes.
And that's what you also pump out of. So you want at least a 20-inch one. 24 is even better because
You're talking around, not tall.
Diameter.
Okay.
Right. The reason is that when you have your tank pumped, I hear this a lot. I never had a problem with my septic system until I had it pumped. I'm never pumping it again. Right? That's because it was pumped incorrectly. They tried to pump it through a small pipe, and they can't see what's in there, and they leave a big chunk. Well, that big chunk floats over to the outlet as the tank refills, plugs up the outlet.
Plugs it up. Mm-hmm.
So one of the indicators is that you can, if you have that large riser on your tank, to answer your first question, is that you could take a tape measure down to the top of what's ever in there, and let's say that's just an arbitrary number. Let's say that's 22 inches.
Okay.
And then a year later, or you go out there and you just write it down somewhere, and then a year later that tank is now 21 inches, so it's 1 inch higher than it used to be, which is not a big deal until it gets very, very much higher up, and then that's a backing up, because when it backs up, it has to start going somewhere.
Sure.
So the typical tank has at least an 8 or 9 inch air space on top. So a manufactured tank typically has a 4-inch pipe coming in, and then the outlet pipe is 4 inches below that. Another 4-inch pipe.
Okay.
So the inlet side drops into your tank, then you have a water level. So you won't experience backing up unless the water level is higher than your inlet pipe.
Well, I know that when we put a new one in, that when we first put in, we had to put water in it.
Right. The only reason.
And why did we have to do that?
Well, the same reason that big old ships float. A typical concrete tank weighs 9,000 pounds, but if it rains enough, the tank will float. So when it's a brand new install with fresh soil on top, it's important to add 6, 8, 10, 12 inches of water to it to keep it from
Some
floating
weight
out.
to kind of weight it down.
Right, to keep it from floating.
Okay. Okay.
And sometimes more, and they still float. And then once the soil is established and you've got firm soil and all that stuff, then having it pumped out and empty won't normally let them float.
I see. Because that was my next question. I was like, well, then if you pump it all out, then what keeps it from floating? But it's because it's so impacted then in the soil that it'll just hold it in place.
Right.
Well, I was reading, because I was kind of doing a little research for the show today, and I was reading that 30% of the people in Missouri still have on-site septics.
Yes.
Which is a fairly big number. I would think a little more than I thought it might be. But I guess if you consider all the rural areas and the farms and the farming communities and that type of thing, that's what they're going to have.
Well, you're going to have one or the other.
Yeah, you're going to have something. So that seems like a lot. Well, Dan, it's 10:30. Do we need to break already, or what? Are we okay?
Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Okay, come back, guys.
Here in Southwest Missouri, we see things a little differently than those liberal politicians in Washington, D.C. Down here, we believe in family and personal responsibility. We believe in working hard and paying back what you owe. Those are our values. We need more leaders like Ward Franz. We can rely on Ward Franz to defend our values because he's one of us. A local employer, Ward Franz is fighting to keep taxes low and to create jobs right here in our community. A friend of agriculture, Ward Franz helped lead the fight to stop animal rights groups from harming our farmers. A dedicated father and husband, Ward Franz is working to protect traditional marriage and defend the innocent lives of the unborn. A proven fiscal conservative, Ward Franz will continue to demand balanced budgets and less government spending. On August 7th, the choice is clear. Vote for the candidate who is defending our values. Vote Ward Franz, State Senate. Paid for by Friends of Ward Franz. Warren Fletcher, Treasurer.
Live on Sunday night, it's Bill Cunningham.
Bill Cunningham, the great American. First, happy birthday to the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. And this Sunday Night Live with the great American, we continue to talk about the affirmation of Obamacare by Justice John Roberts in the U.S. Supreme Court. Is he a rhino? This Sunday night with the great American, Bill Cunningham.
Willie.
The Bill Cunningham Show, Sunday night at 9:05 on KWTO.
Here's news on the Ozarks News Network. A teenage boy is dead and a man under arrest after a shooting in northeast Springfield. 64-year-old William R. Jones allegedly shot and killed his 14-year-old stepson Trevor Reynolds yesterday. Jones was arrested at his home at 1421 East Livingston. He's charged with second-degree murder. Springfield police have made an arrest in an early morning holdup at a Northside convenience store. They say the bandit said he had a gun and escaped on a bicycle at the Come and Go at National and Norton. It took officers less than an hour to track down the suspects. And fire officials are looking into the cause of a fire that heavily damaged a home east of Springfield. The blaze was on Farm Road 156. Firefighters worked through the night to put out the fire and cool hot spots. For the Ozarks News Network, I'm Arlen Summers.
We won't get a break from the heat at least throughout the weekend, as it will be hot again today with mostly sunny skies. The high 102, that'll break the record of 98 reached back in 1975. Patchy clouds for tonight, low 71. A mix of clouds and sunshine and hot again as we head into Saturday. The high near the record of 100 reached back in 1939. There is a chance for a thunderstorm, otherwise sunny, hot, and humid again for your Sunday, the high 97. I'm AccuWeather's Jason Lord.
When it comes to your retirement, stop risking your hard-earned money. Brad Pistole, the host of Safe Money Radio, would like to share some safe money investment strategies with you this Wednesday at 2 p.m. on KWTO AM 560. He'll talk about guaranteed protection of principal, wealth management, and income solutions. And to get your free Safe Money kit, you can call 866-780-SAFE any day of the week. 866-780-SAFE. Join Brad for Safe Money Radio this Wednesday at 2 p.m. on KWTO AM 560. Join KTXR Saturday, July 14th for another exciting trip to Branson. We'll meet at noon at the Kmart parking lot at the corner of Kearney and Glenstone, then head to the Andy Williams Theater for the 2 o'clock Cat's Pajamas show. Dinner will be at Andy Williams Grill, and after dinner, we'll see the American Idol finalists perform at 7:30. Tickets are just $39 per person. That includes bus transportation, dinner, and entertainment. Make your reservations today. Call 862-3751 during business hours. 862-3751.
Well, I went down to the hardware store to see my old friend Bob. I said my roof it leaks, my rug's a mess, and my front door needs a new knob. I got squirrels in my attic, I got bats in my head. Well, Bob just leaned over the counter and he shook his head and said, you need home repairs and solutions. Home repairs and solutions. They'll fix your windows, they'll fix your house, they'll even tell you how to get rid of a mouse. Home repairs and solutions.
And you are listening to Home Repairs and Solutions with Mary Pearson. Brought to you by Spring Mountain Air Heating and Air Conditioning and your local Amanda dealer. And Mary Pearson is here right now with our guest for today. Mary, we're back with the second half of the show. And I'm glad we're back on the air after being off for an hour, a little over an hour.
I'm glad you're back on too, but try not to do that during my show.
Okay, we won't. Well, at least we got you on. A little late, but
we did. But we got a great guest today. Great information. We're talking with Mike Monroe of On-Site Inspections, and he does septic tanks and wells for the area here, and he's very knowledgeable about our area and our different soils and all the kind of things we deal with here, rocks, and we deal with lots of things here in Missouri, red clay. We have all kinds of different soil situations that come into play when you're going to do something like that. When you have a septic, a lot of times, they say you should have it pumped out pretty regularly. So we kind of talked about what is regularly. It depends on the size and different things like that. But what kind of is of a rule of thumb for someone to have it pumped out?
Well, like you said, it depends on how large your tank is and how big your family is. So typically, if you pump your tank every 3 or 4 years, you're all right. But if you have relatively small tank, like 3, 4, 500-gallon tank, and you have 4 or 5 people living there, then you might want to have it pumped every year.
Isn't there regulation though? Isn't when you get ready to replace a tank or something, then I mean there's certain specifications as to what size tank you need to put in or that you can put in. Is that correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And is that based on the number of bedrooms, the number of people in the home? What's that based on? Square footage? How do they figure that?
Well, here in Missouri, it's based on number of bedrooms.
Number of bedrooms?
If you have a 1, 2, or 3 bedroom home, the minimum size is 1,000 gallons.
Okay.
If you have a 4 bedroom, it's 1,250. 5 bedroom, 1,500, and from there they have a formula that tells you the minimum size.
Okay.
Tankage.
About how often do you have to replace your a tank? About how? I mean, do they? I would think they'd last quite a while because they're concrete. Is that correct?
Right. And I've done around, well, as of this morning, I've done 8,333 inspections of existing septic tanks, and I think the oldest I've ever inspected was built in 1900s.
Oh wow!
And
it's still working okay?
Yeah, it was fine.
Wow.
Yeah. And so some of the newer ones, though, I've seen some that cost, the home cost $1.2 million. It was 4 years old and had a bad septic system.
Wow.
So I think it really comes down to the integrity of the folks that put it in for you.
Sure.
It's not always about price, and even sometimes when you buy, like even a car, some cars seem to last forever and some of them don't last very long.
Well, part of that's maintenance too.
Right.
I would say, if you do proper maintenance on your septic, it might help it last longer. I don't know if you keep it pumped out and it's not getting clogged up. I don't know. Does that matter? Or?
Not really. On a majority are concrete septic tanks, and where you see the largest issues with tanks is right at the water line. The tanks right at the water line have a very high sulfuric acid content. So
Okay.
you'll see etching into the concrete, and it eats away at the concrete more severely right where the air and the water line is. Consequently, that's where you know if you've got a good tank or not, because if the concrete mix that day wasn't a very good mix, then they eat away quicker. And I've seen them erode
That
away
makes
very
sense.
quickly, mostly from the acids. Here in Missouri, we have a lot of acids in our soil, naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, acids eat away your concrete. They eat at the clay tile. They eat at your electric lines that are buried that's not in conduit, things like that. So it's the combination of the acids, also the rocks, as the rocks migrate through your soil, because every time you mow your lawn, you find a new rock.
Yeah, I think we grow them here.
They grow here. I call them Missouri potatoes.
Yeah, that's right. You can pick them all up, and next year you have more, and it's like, what is going on here?
And as those rocks migrate through your soil, they cause issues. But the benefit side, just like worms, is they add oxygen, airspace to your soil.
Sure.
And that oxygen.
And that's
is key.
important in dissipating the stuff through your laterals and things.
Right.
What is there anything you need to do? I mean, there's really no way to do anything to maintain your lateral lines, correct? I mean, they either work or they don't, or.
Well, when I install them, I do them a little bit differently. I think that septic systems in the last 6 to 8 years have become a more permanent thing as opposed to temporary, as we talked about prior. And what I like to see more of is what's called inspection ports, because you should be able to have there are ways to adjust your septic system in the middle, because you just can't wait for it to fail and then react. Most do, but there are ways to put in septic systems so that you can adjust them as time goes on. You can monitor things, and most of that is called inspection ports, where on each line, you can do that on an existing system. Put inspection ports so you can monitor the ponding in each line. So if you see line 1's getting more water than line 2, or vice versa, then there's ways to adjust it through your distribution box and other ways to keep your system more balanced, so that you can help keep it last longer. Probably the best way is, the most optimum would be to have 2 drain fields, believe it or not. And so you would use one drain field for several years, let's say 3 years, and you shut off the water flow to that one and hook it on to your other one and let the first one set for a few years. The oxygen in the soil will eat away all the biomat and the sludge and the buildup and actually repair itself. So like recently, we're seeing a lot of repossessed homes. And so these systems have been sitting there for a year or 2 or 3 without any water. Those drain fields have healed themselves, and you'll get a lot more. The typical home, you don't get a 2 or 3 year rest.
Sure, that's true.
Period.
So if you were going to do, when you're talking about 2 drain fields, would that be like having like one in the front of the house and one in the back of the house? Or how far apart do these drain fields need to be if you're going to try and set up 2?
Well, there's no specific rules on residential that says the distance between, I don't think. I'd have to look, but usually only 10 or 20 feet apart, I would guess, would be.
Oh, well, that's not as far apart as I thought they would have to be then.
No.
So you could, if you had a 3-acre lot or 5-acre lot or whatever it is, you could literally have 2 in the backyard or wherever you're going to have them, kind of side by side, actually.
Right, and what I've done in both Greene and Christian County and some other counties is that when they have an existing drain field but they're having issues with it, you can go ahead, and each county is a little bit different, you kind of talk them into it sometimes, but if you have an existing system that was a permitted system, as an example, I did one that was a permitted system 12 years ago, but it's having issues. And consequently, we put in a second drain field, but what we did was we put a valve in there so that we could dose to the new one in fact, the guy just changed it over. He's been dosing to it for 4 years, and they just switched back to his old one. So when you have 2 drain fields that you can give extended rest period to, then they'll heal themselves and you'll have basically drain field forever.
Wow, I didn't realize you could do that. That's a great idea if you have the room and space to do that. So if someone's going to put in a on-site septic today, is there certain requirements? You have to have a certain amount of land to do that now. I would say a certain amount of acreage or something. Is there a minimum amount of acreage you have to do that?
Yes. In the state of Missouri, the minimum size for an on-site system is 0.92 acres. So
okay.
It's relatively
it's smaller than
small.
I thought.
Yes. And depending on how your lot is laid out, you can actually even have a lagoon on a 1-acre lot if it's properly, the setbacks and everything.
Now, a lagoon is just an open pond system type. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Why would anyone want to do that?
Everyone in Springfield, in the city limits, lives on a lagoon.
Well, that's true. That's true. I knew that. Yeah.
So,
but why would you want one in your backyard? I guess I'm asking.
Well, environmentally, unless you have an alternate system like you talked about, you may have at your house. That environmentally, a lagoon does a better job treating the bacteria than a in-ground system.
Oh, really?
Also, a lagoon will also handle more abuse. If you have, example, Dan says he's on city sewers, so his lagoon holds millions of gallons of water.
Yes.
So if Dan goes and dumps a gallon of paint thinner down his drain, that gallon's going into a 1,000,000-gallon reserve. So it's not as big of impact.
As opposed to going into a 1,000-gallon tank or something.
That's a huge impact.
Sure.
And a lagoon might have 20,000, 30,000 gallons of water and can environmentally handle better than a underground system.
I see.
Underground system, doesn't smell as bad typically. They're more money.
Sure.
The lagoon, if they do ever have an odor, there's ways to couple pounds of fertilizer, throw it out there, and that'll take the smell away. And lagoon,
and they stir those, don't they?
No,
they
not
don't.
On residential.
Okay. No, but I mean on like the city. Do they?
Yes.
The big ones they have those stir things in there, but you don't need that if you're going to do that in a residential application.
Not typically, because what it amounts to is how we treat sewage, whether you're on septic or city sewer, is moving it from an aerobic environment to an anaerobic. The more times you go back and forth, the better the water gets, bacteria-wise, right? So just like Dan is on the city sewer, his city sewer system, It goes into a big holding pond. They separate the solids out. They let some of the water. They shoot it up in the air. They go over waterfalls. They go through all kinds of different things. Let it settle out again. And,
Sure.
you know, and they're going in that process. You're just going from aerobic to anaerobic back and forth. Well, on a residential sewer system, like a septic system, you got very little back and forth. You have your septic tank is the typical is anaerobic, meaning without air. Then it goes out into the drain field, which is an aerobic environment, and it produces the bacteria or the microorganisms to consume the bacteria that's in the water out in the soil, and that's how septics work.
Did you know all that, Dan?
No, I didn't. I'm learning a lot.
I know. I didn't know all that either. Something else that you mentioned earlier that I thought was interesting, because a lot of people have trouble with tree roots getting into their system or their laterals or whatever. And you mentioned something that you can use that's a very simple thing to do that will keep those tree roots from getting into your system. And talk a little bit about how that works and what did you call it? Copper sulfate?
Copper sulfate. The old timers used to put a copper wire and they'd hang it in their 4-inch pipe, and as you flush your toilets, you use water, it would, brush past the wire, and that would release copper sulfate. And the roots really don't like copper sulfate. In high doses, it would probably kill things, the trees and stuff. But in low doses, the tree roots pull back away from it and don't like the taste, so they pull away as opposed to just die and leave the debris behind, plug up your pipes. So if you take a couple tablespoons of copper sulfate, don't do what it says on the package. The package will say
don't dump the whole package.
They'll tell you on the package like 4 or 5 pounds in a 1,000-gallon tank. And,
oh my!
Oh yeah, it's crazy. What you really are concerned about, whether you're on septic or city sewer, is that you want to take care of the part you're responsible for. So if you're on city sewer, it's between your house and the sewer main.
Right.
Sewer main down, the city does that. So by adding a little bit of copper sulfate, a couple tablespoons once a month, to a drain that you don't want to pick the nicest drain in your house. You want to pick like the utility sink drain or somewhere where you might want to test it, make sure it doesn't stain the stuff. And you put a couple tablespoons in there and then put your faucet on a drip. Because if you just throw it in the toilet and pull the handle, then it's going to go so fast through the pipe that it doesn't stick to anything. You want to coat your pipes. Consequently, kind of like time release, you might think. Or you could take a couple tablespoons if you have a clean out on the outside of your house between the house and the road, put it in there, then put your thing on a drip, and it'll just take and pull that copper sulfate through very slowly, coat your pipes, and the roots will pull back.
Then you don't have to redo things when the roots go crashing through and tears everything up, because they will. The roots can do a lot of damage.
Incidentally, I am making notes.
Are you?
Copper sulfate, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you're good, Dan.
It's called the plumber's secret.
The plumber's secret.
Yeah. They don't tell you about it because they want to root.
Well, sure, that's how they make a living, and so I get that.
We all have to do that.
Absolutely. So, but that's something that I had never heard of before, and we have had tree roots become a problem in the past. So that's a great idea, and that would be something that would be very cost effective, because when you have to go in and dig up lateral lines and repair things, it's usually not as cheap as buying a package of copper sulfate, I'm sure.
Right. Another thing that I get asked a lot is trees, trees in your yard and blah, blah, blah. I'm a big fan of trees in the yard or trees near your drain field.
Oh, yeah, I love trees.
They drink water.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Consequently, the tree, how you select your trees. You typically, for around your septic system, you want trees that don't like wet feet. So the oaks, the walnuts, the hickories are common trees. And you can check with your arborist or your plant people, which ones. But like willows like wet feet. So the willows and stuff will like grow into your septic tank, grow into your pipe, going after
and keep going deeper after the water.
After the water.
Sure.
But trees that don't like wet feet don't typically grow into those pipes.
That's interesting to know. We have a caller holding on the line. We have Jim from Springfield. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for calling. Do you have a question for Mike?
Yeah, no, I just want to say I'm one of the station engineers here. We just put you back on the radio. We had a little power failure apparently around the country and around the area, so we're back on 560 here. I wanted to say from my experience in the radio business, there was a time when, in order to make radio stations get out better, the AM stations, we would use the copper sulfate trick around the ground radios. Decades ago, in my understanding, copper sulfate added to the soil is highly toxic and highly illegal in places, and it's very toxic to people. Copper sulfate, I hear what you're saying. It probably does do exactly what you're saying about tree roots, but that became a big no-no decades ago, in my understanding, from the broadcast business, putting it in the soil. Do you have any experience with that?
No, because actually on the package, and my guess would be it would be the concentration that you were doing, but the small concentrations. That's why when I read the package that says to put it 4 or 5 pounds in your septic tank, I was thinking, whoa, that's a lot. But
yeah, really.
A couple tablespoons once a month just to coat your pipes is what I was leaning more toward. And just like the only difference between most chemicals is whether or not you have to have a license or it's too much is the quantity that you're storing. So,
yes.
Like fertilizer, if you got a small amount of it, it's legal. If you got a 55-gallon drum of it, then you've done something illegal. And you have to have a license.
How about the effect on the bacteria in the septic system? I can't even use bleach in my house because it disturbs the digestive bacteria. Will copper sulfate affect that? Do you know?
Not typically, no. What you want to be more careful is we were talking about just the basic septic systems. If you have an advanced system like a Norweco or a multi-flow or an aerated system, then the pH of the water is extremely critical.
Yes.
I even have some households that I have them put 2 or 3 ounces of muriatic acid down their toilet once a month to adjust the pH. I find the pH of city water here in Springfield to be a little elevated. Consequently, you need to lower the pH in order to get an aerobic environment. So, if you have an advanced system, then you would want to talk to them about it. But I would copper sulfate. Now, as far as bleach, my experience with bleach is you can dump a whole gallon of bleach in a typical everyday anaerobic septic system, and it'll only kill the tank for about 4 hours.
Wow.
2 tablespoons of liquid Drano will kill it for 2 weeks.
Good heaven, yeah.
And I've done a lot of these inspections, so I put some people into what I call clean freaks, and I'll go to a household. Their tank's absolutely dead. I open it, there's no odor, it's deader than a doornail, it's not acting normal, and they're just over usage of chemicals. They'll dump 2 cups of liquid bleach in their toilet twice a day, swish it around, trying to kill bacteria, and just killing everything. Where they don't realize that you're using calcium hypochlorite or sodium hypochlorite bleach, and 5 parts per million is swimming pool water, which pretty much kills everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
And another excellent product that I'm seeing on the market is that Nixol stuff, which is a natural disinfectant. Good stuff.
How about Rid-X? We were told to put Rid-X in once a month, and I do that. That's supposed to restore the bacteria.
I'm a very big fan of not using products like Rid-X and things like that. And the reason is that doing thousands and thousands of these inspections, also my background is my master's in biochemistry and physics, so I'm really into the science of septic. And, you don't pretty much go to college thinking someday I want to play in poop, but it seems to be it seems to be my life.
Somebody's got to do it, Mike.
Yeah. So products like what I observe with my personal opinion is that what I observe with Rid-X is that what it does is it changes the specific gravity of the water so that the solids float. Well, the entire purpose of the septic tank is to separate the solids from the liquids so that the solids stay in the tank, the liquids high in bacteria go to the drain field. Well, when you add a product that changes that, it does what it says on the label, which is clean your tank. But a lot of times you're going to take a $180 pumping job to a several $1,000 replacement of your drain field because you've moved all that solids and sludge and biomat to your drain field.
I'll be darned.
So don't do that, Jim.
I certainly am glad I spoke to you about that. We have a relatively new system. I live in Kimberling City, and the house that we bought had an old and very small system, almost the kind designed for a trailer park. So we had to put a brand new one in. It cost a lot of money. The county offset the cost, and it has 3 percolating stacks out back, and there's a aerator and everything else. And there's both aerobic and anaerobic bacteria in there.
Correct.
As was explained to us, and they come out and check it from time to time.
So
and it works okay, but I said, how about some bleach? I like to put bleach in my washing machine, he said, well, just a little bit, like a capful every once in a while, because otherwise it'll kill the bacteria.
No, you can be pretty abused. I mean, a cup or 2 of bleach into your wash loads, I mean, I wouldn't go crazy, but if it's a multi-flow or a Norweco, if you have 3 concrete risers on top, it's probably a Norweco, and a little bleach won't hurt it.
Jim, we're running out of time. Thanks for calling, and thanks for getting us back on the air today. Mike, thanks for being with us. Before we take off, give out your phone number in case someone has questions or wants to give you a call.
Oh, it's 417-880-7062.
Thanks for being our guest today. We'll have you back on. I'm sorry it was a short hour today, but I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next Friday.
Home repairs and solutions. They'll fix your windows, they'll fix your house, they'll even tell you how to get rid of a mouse. Home repairs.